What's up, my know-it-alls? Well, it's time for us to go on a brand new adventure, and that adventure is with the new Disney Plus series, Willow. So hopefully, if you're sitting down, you're ready for an adventure, because here we go. Yeah, man, that was so much fun. We started watching it this morning and had some internet issues, so unfortunately I had to watch it a little later than normal. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm very, very thrilled. If you get an opportunity, make sure you don't miss our Willow, sort of the know-it-all files of the Willow film, the 1988 film. I'm gonna put the card for that right up here, and I would love it if you took an opportunity to watch that first, just kind of as a primer. But until then, let's dive right into this. So, the episode starts with Sorcha, who is, those of you who don't remember, Sorcha is the daughter of Bavmorda. She was the one who kind of helped and turned after she met Madmartigan and was kind of started seeing her mother being evil and kind of really understood how bad things were getting in the original film. So she gives us kind of a flashback of the events. We get kind of some bullets from the film. And then you're very much just thrown right into meeting some young people. You get to meet Kit and Eric. These are Madmartigan's kids, and they are absolutely his children. The first time you see Kit, she is up on a cliff fighting with Jade, who's both her girlfriend and guardian. Jade is training to be a knight in the Legion, in the Shining Legion, which was the other thing. Eric, by the way, named after Eric from the movie. So that's fun. And so they're practicing on the thing, only to find out Eric is himself snogging, if you will, with a young lady he calls Dove, who is the muffin girl. She's the girl who works baking in the kitchens. And Eric has kind of that personality that he's sort of that guy. This is for you, baby know-it-all. Eric is that guy. And so he is known for throwing his affection at the young ladies in the kingdom. And so everyone's kind of like trying to warn Dove away from sort of getting enthralled with him, as it were. But he's talking very much like, this is serious and this and that. He's so funny, too, because he's wearing this, like, he almost looks like he's ready to go out to the club. Seriously. And this fantasy thing. So I'm like, okay. That's the one thing I did say, and I told Miss Know-it-all that. I feel like all the other actors, the older actors, are behaving and acting as if they're in a period piece. They're doing the things they're supposed to do. They're talking a certain way. All the younger actors almost feel like they're slipping into modern day ways of talking. And so, I don't bump into it. I just something I was like, oh, okay, it's a choice. So then, and they're really, so they make a decision in this series to immediately, and you find this out in the exposition dump in the very beginning, you find out that they decided for the safety of everybody. Apparently Willow had some dream, and in the dream he saw the end of all things. And so they decided for everyone that was safe, they were going to ban magic and put a barrier up around Tirzleen. So that's one of those things that they also said they were going to hide Elora Danan even from herself. This is a writing thing that you do when you don't want, when you're faced with, I have too much backstory that I have to deal with. Star Trek Discovery goes 300 years in the future. There is no canon to speak of. They can make up anything they want. So same idea here. They've said, okay, cool, Elora Danan, we had all this obligation of the prophecy that is not been fulfilled yet. The other thing is they're borrowing heavily. So there was a book series called like The Shadow Wars or The Shadows of something or other that came out after the original movie. I'm assuming, and I said this in my Willow 1988 review, I very much believe Disney's taking the idea of the same way they did for Star Wars and saying, hey, we're not going to, this stuff is legend. This stuff is maybe it happened, whatever, and we may borrow from it. I think they're borrowing heavily from that book series. I never read those books, but before I jumped into all this, I wanted to make sure I understood what the context was of some things. And I've read a pretty detailed synopsis of that series, and it feels like a lot of the elements, like Willow having a dream and the end of all things and blah, 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 all these things are being borrowed from that series. Now, jumping back into this thing. So again, we don't know we have no clue where she is. You also start to learn that Madmartigan is not there anymore. You don't know if he's dead or what happened. You do find out in a little bit, but in the very beginning, you don't really know that much. So then Sorcha begins hearing whispers, and the whispers she's hearing are saying the word, the Gales. It's the very title of the episode, the Gales. So clearly we're going to get something having to do along with that. When You find out also Sorsha has betrothed her daughter Kit to the Prince of Galadorn. Specifically, it's a way of merging the realm together. Right now, you've had independent kingdoms, Galadorn and Tir Asleen. There are some others, I guess, further away, but for the most part, they are there. But they're still, though they're independent kingdoms, they're all one realm. So now they're talking about this marriage is going to link those two things up. Meanwhile, Jade has her own side story, and in this side story, Jade has Ballantine, who's the head of the King's Guard, and one of the other King's Guardsmen, or one of the elites who's training all the swordsmen. They have put her name in, and they've made a special exception. She'll end up being the first woman to join the Shining Legion. Well, she didn't know how to tell her girlfriend Kit about that, so she's somewhat upset about this and it tears her apart. How do you talk to her, this whole thing? It's classic, especially because Kit's about to have to get married anyway. So everybody is completely inconvenienced. You got this dinner, and at this dinner, you get to meet the Prince of Galadorn. The Prince of Galadorn is actually a pretty cool guy. I say that he's a pretty cool guy, but no, the Prince is one of those people who he's very well read, and other than that, he's kind of, dare I say, for those of you who are in the know, he's kind of foppish, but meaning he's one of those princes who's aloof. Has nothing to do with gender bias or any of those things. It's very much just his behavior. Foppish does not mean, perhaps, some people might interpret that as gay. It's not the case. It's just very much he's aloof. I'm a king, I'm a prince, I'm a whatever. Anyways, he seems to be very well read. He understands languages and understands verbals, and that's going to come in handy a little bit later. So, as he's going about just kind of trying to be at this wedding dinner, so to speak, because they're basically marrying off Kit. Kit has this blow up because Jade just tells her she's leaving. She's being forced to get married. So she calls everybody out and embarrasses herself. So the queen is very upset. She goes down after sending both kids to sleep. Go to bed with no supper. She ends up going down to the dungeon and she has a conversation with someone. We don't know who that person is yet, but the person clearly is someone who understands a little bit of what's going on in the world. And so as we go on further, as the night progresses, suddenly a fog rolls in. On the heels of this fog are some characters. These are the Gales. It's this giant monster-looking dude with a spiked cage around his head. It's a chick who flies and transforms metamorphoses into a vulture thing. And she's the one who actually kind of starts the attack because she's essentially grabbing sentries right off of the ramparts and just dropping them. So it's like, oh my gosh. Meanwhile, there's another guy who's a lich. I got 99 problems, but a lich ain't one unless you're the Willow show. So this guy is, everyone seems very well trained and in attacking stuff. And for a castle that's got guards and everything else, you really kind of, the fog, I want to say they're using the fog as an excuse to why certain things are happening. There's not a whole lot of people involved in this battle. This is supposed to be a battle, and maybe you see maybe a half dozen people running around at any given time. So for something that's supposed to feel like a scale of very big, it's scaled a little small for me. Anyway, moving on. So earlier you found out, by the way, that Kit was actually going to leave. She was going to be running away, and that's sort of what began a lot of this stuff, because then the first guy falls out of the sky, and that's how the whole thing explodes off. When the smoke clears, when the fog, if you will, clears, Eric is missing. And that's when the prince, who's up watching everything from upstairs in his room out the window, he says, it seemed like once they got him, everything went away. I believe they got what they wanted. So immediately they put together a fellowship, if you will, to go and leave the barrier in order to go find a sorcerer, because the only way to deal with this magic issue is with magic. There's only one sorcerer left because they've banned magic, and that's the High Andowyne, who also known as Willow. Come on, kids. And so that's what they do. So they get together, the prince ends up going along because his dad basically is like, look, man, you want to become a man? You get on that road and you go find your princess. The princess has something to prove anyway. Jade has been tasked with her defense and protecting her. And then they also assign everybody there is ready to go, and they go. While they're on the way, haven't even arrived at the barrier yet, Dove has followed them. She has declared her love because, unbeknownst to everybody else, Eric gave her a keepsake and has basically asked her kind of impromptu to marry him. he's taking the relationship very seriously. So she's like, I can cook this and that, blah, blah, blah. And so the guy, the leader of the party is like, all right, listen, we can't do anything till the morning. We'll wait till morning. Really, this is his very clever way of being like, hey, go make dinner. Figure out, let everybody see your value. And so she does that. And Borman, who's one of the guys, you find out Borman, during the big fight, Borman was the guy in the dungeon. Borman got released to fight. He's got this massive cleaver sword. Oh, dude, cosplayers are going to lose their minds over this sword. I expect next Dragon Con to see nothing but a whole bunch of people dressed like this. So they move forward and they eventually arrive at the actual barrier. And you find out before they cross the barrier, you get to see a little bit of an exposition dump where they explain why the barrier's there. Apparently, Sherlendria and Finn Rizal, the two sorceresses from the movie, they put it up as a way to protect the realm. Now, they thought it was, we're going to protect from this and that. No, it's literally protecting Elora Danan. But they don't know where Elora Danan is. So, meanwhile, What's-Her-Face leaves early, Dove leaves early, and she ends up getting to this gorge where she finds a tree has fallen, and she manages to get across it. Everyone else arrives at the castle area where the keep is, the Mother's Gate, and they go through, and they find out everyone's gone. And then, so when they get there, there's nobody there, no guards there, nothing. There's blood writing on the wall. The prince can read it. And it's basically warding them off and warning them against the coming of some giant worm. It's like a dark prophecy thing. It's the kind of thing evil people write on walls to be scary and creepy. And so, and when they do finally cross, they discover Muffin Girl is there. She managed to make it across. Now, what's important about that? When Muffin Girl got across the gorge, she was right in front of the barrier. She passed through the barrier effortlessly. So why do they need a Mother's Gate if people can pass through the barrier effortlessly? Hang on to that. Okay. So when they get out away from the thing, they're managed on horses. They find Muffin Girl. They put her on the horse, and you end up. Their leader gets killed. This guy who's been sent out with them just unceremoniously gets killed. So they have to book it, and they're heading as fast as they can. And Borman happens to be shouting something, whatever, as he approaches this ledge. Him and his horse run right over it. Everybody else sees it. They all go into the water, and their horses manage to swim the rest of the way. The Bone Reavers all apparently have something going on with Borman. They recognize him. They call him by name. They thought he was dead. You find out later, Borman was Madmartigan's squire. That piece of information is going to come in a lot handy a little bit later. Finally, they arrive at the Nelwyn village, or what's left of it. The Nelwyn village looks like it's been abandoned for a long, long time. And Elwyn shows up, and he says he's Willow, and they're like, no, you're not, blah, 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 this and that. And then Willow actually shows up. Willow shows up, and he introduces himself, and then he walks past everyone and goes straight to Muffin Girl. He touches her arm, and just like that, the tattoo shows up. She's Elora Danan. Oh, yeah. Big reveal. So there you go. Now you know, and if knowing is half the battle, you're halfway to being a know-it-all yourself. So what is the know-it-all index for episode 1, The Gales? I'm going to give this episode, it's not a great episode. It isn't a bad one either. But I'm going to go 7.5. This is essentially a setting up episode. It's an establishing episode. It's setting up a whole lot of things. So we're going to put that right there. And now we're going to roll right into episode 2, The High Andowyne. Okay. So now we've established a lot of what we needed to establish to get to this point. And ultimately what we're facing is now they're at Willow's village, but the village is gone. Willow has brought everybody underground. Now this episode actually starts with a flashback to a younger Willow and a younger Sorsha having kind of established this new thing. And he's like, it's getting almost time. We need to start training her, this and that. And Sorsha's like, look, we beat the big bad. Why don't we, to avoid what you saw, why don't we just ban magic? Put a barrier, the barrier is going to protect this and that. Let's just ban magic. None of it. Nobody has to learn anything. It'll die away. It's gone. And he's like, you don't seem to understand. If you think that this darkness is just going to go away, you're wrong. And she basically says, and she's like, well, who's going to train him anyway? Charlindria's gone. Finn Rizel's gone. He's like, I'll train him. And he's like, and she says, and Sorsha says something really hurtful, and I don't understand why she said it. I'm hoping we get some reveal later that she knows something, but she says, I love you. You're the bravest person I ever met. You will never be a great sorcerer. And that really hurt me. I was like, oh, bro, that's rough, man. So then back in the present, you see Elora still kind of taking it all in, who we now know Muffin Girl to be Elora Danan. The Nelwyns have all moved below ground. Mims, the daughter, Willow's daughter, all grown up. She introduced herself to Elora, and again, it's all very overwhelming. They get together. He tries to Willow. This is probably the most Willow moment that we've, in terms of feeling like you felt before. He's the High Andowyne. He's replaced the guy from the beginning from the first movie. He's also got an apprentice of his own who apparently isn't supporting him in this whole thing. But at the end of the day, he tries to explain, you got to learn all this stuff. And she's like, I don't want to learn this thing. I don't want to do this, blah, blah, blah. She leaves. Way back at Tiersleen, this guy named Ballantyne. Ballantyne was the head of the guards. Ballantyne was injured in that big fight with the Gales. While Ballantyne he has been infected. And you get this moment where you see the Lich, and the Lich is talking about, you see not the Lich. You get this moment where Sorcerer calls him over and says, I need you to go find the blah, 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 the maid. The woman who watches the maid is like, did you tell him who she is? And she's like, no, he doesn't care. I just want to tell him this and that, whatever. He leaves with a group of others to go. Now we cut back to the Gales, who are reporting back to the crone. All we hear is the crone's voice. Now, sidebar, I believe this crone, 100%, we're going to find out is the spirit or the evil or the power or the magic, whatever, that possessed and had control of Bavmorda. If it is not Bavmorda herself, because the person doing the voice of the crone is leaning heavy into the Bavmorda sounding stuff. Her diction, everything, and her voice in general sound like Bavmorda. We don't see anybody's face, just a voice. But she also mentions Elora Danan still has the power to destroy her. Elora Danan's only purpose was to destroy the darkness or the evil, which at the time was Bavmorda. So again, a lot of things happening in terms of dropping the story nuggets they're dropping. But overall, I'm still really excited kind of for the direction that I see this thing heading in. So continuing. Once they do the finger test at the village, and unfortunately, poor Elora does not pass it. And so she's really upset. She runs away, and everyone's looking for her. And what's-her-face, Kit decides, I'm leaving. I'm going to do my own thing. And Kit goes off. And then you get to this moment where Willow is up above ground, and they're searching, and he goes by his old house. It's the rundown remnants of his old place. And you see this really great Kaya, it's his wife, and you see the daughter rescue the little baby, and you see all these moments. And then we cut to the river, and you see Elora standing there, and that's where Willow shows up, and he's like, I found this and that. And she's all very much like, what's going on? What do we do? What's happening? And she agrees, okay. All she wants to do is save Eric. And he's like, look, you need me to save Eric, and I need you to save the world. So we need to work together. And that's how this thing begins. And so they ultimately all set off together as a group. They had to head toward the west, because apparently in order to find Eric and fight this whole thing, they have to go to the Immemorial Castle, or the Immemorial City, or whatever. A lot of fun names in this show. And so they have to go, which means they have to cross what's called the Shattered Shining Sea, or something to that effect. And something Borman's like, yeah, that's not going to happen. And meanwhile, while they're going on the road, Ballantyne's tracking them. Ballantyne manages to track them all the way to Willow's old village, where he sees Mims. Mims tried to send them off the trail. One of his guys says that he finds wagon tracks. The guy turns like he's going to face Mims. Mims is gone. They're hiding underground, as the Nelwyns should. Good for you. Good girl listening to your dad. So this is where Borman reveals that he was Bavmordian's squire, and he basically says, yeah, I know exactly where he went. He and I went in search of the Chimerian cuirass, which is supposed to be an armor, some sort of an armor breastplate, a thing that's going to protect either a Chimerian or someone who, which, by the way, Elora Danan's the last of the Chimerians. He's the last of the Chimerian. That's why she's like the heir apparent, the empress, and all that stuff. So when they're on their way, the prince, who sees Elora having a hard time because Willow's trying to teach her. She can't even pronounce the words right. Remember, prince guy, really good at all the words and all the wordplay. He knows exactly, so he's like, trying to offer her stuff, and she's like, I don't know, this and that. And she's like, everyone hates me. And then he has this really great moment where he goes, what are you talking, like, she, meaning Kit, Kit's jealous. Jade is duty bound. Borman's hanging out to see what you're made of. Like, the only person who doesn't seem to believe that there's something special is you. And that really hits her hard. And then she redoubles her efforts to go ahead and start learning the magic words a little better. He does offer to help because he's really good at linguistics and arcana and all that stuff. So Willow goes to sleep. He's upset. He talks to his buddy who's with him from another Nelwyn. And he's like, I think we need to go. It's this and that. And the Nelwyn's like, you got to be patient, bro. He's like, trust me, I want to go back too. I don't want to be here, but you got to be patient. You got to let her do this and thing and blah, blah, blah. And then there's this and then you find out Willow's dream isn't just a portent of bad things coming. Willow's dream is that Elora Danan, in order to save the world, has to die. Now we're into the story. Now we're into the fullness of this prophecy and all these things. I like that they're going that route. It was a little stutter-steppy for me in the first episode, but I feel like we're getting much more focused on our journey now in the second episode. I can't wait for the third. But either way, you see that. So that night, while all that's happening, Kit goes over to Borman and says, "I need you to tell me everything about my father and about that about the Chimerian cuirass." That's when Elora wakes up in the morning and she gets real angry because the sproutling hasn't grown, and she's so upset, and she pounds her fist into the ground and she's angry, and she's about to start trying the words again even more forcefully when bam, Valentine shows up and knocks her out. Valentine has her. The Dark Crone has Elora, and it's looking bad, man. It's looking bad. So as right before the credits hit, they push in on the place where she was angry against the ground. And not only because he was like, it's going to be a sprout this big. It's like a sapling with fruit, and the whole bit grows. And you're like, oh, okay. The spark's not gone. So there you go. Now you know. And if knowing's half the battle, you have to being a know-it-all yourself. So what is the know-it-all index for episode 2? The High Alduin. This is a better episode. I'm going to give this an 8. Flat out. Give it an 8. Good job. It was awesome. Setting the stage. I'm expecting great things from the third episode. So yeah, comment below. Let me know what you think of the show. Let me know if you're going to keep watching it. All right, man. We're going to do it for that's going to do it for us today. Never forget, everyone loves a know-it-all.